The original Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine, developed by Relic Entertainment and released in 2011, was the textbook example of a cult classic, and after nearly a decade and a half of demands of a sequel, Space Marine 2 is finally upon us. Saber Interactive's third-person action title has looked increasingly promising each time it's been shown off in the lead-up to its release, and with launch right around the corner now, here we're going over a few key things you should know about Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. Campaign length. For many, the campaign is going to be the star attraction in Space Marine 2, and based on what Saber has said so far, it's looking like it's going to be a meaty experience. As per the developer, the campaign, which will see players stepping into the shoes of Lieutenant Dimitri and Titus once again, is going to be roughly 10 to 12 hours long, depending on the difficulty and your skill level. Campaign co-op. Multiplayer is a big part of the Space Marine 2 experience, and while a lot of that will come through dedicated modes, the shooter will also give players the chance to run through its campaign in 3-player co-op. When asked about why lore-accurate 4-player co-op isn't supported, Saber's brand and creative manager Jan-Francois told PC Gamer, "It was quite a challenge for the team to say, okay, Space Marines are almost invincible. How do we create a challenge around it? Because it could be super easy." That is what led up to the choice of creating a multiplayer of up to 3 players, because many people asked, why is it not up to 4 players? They tried it, and they realized it was too easy. It was a massacre, so 3 was a good number. Operations. Outside of its campaign, Space Marine 2 is going to have plenty of multiplayer content on offer. For those who prefer PvE, there's Operations, a 3-player co-op mode that sees players working together to tackle a variety of different objectives, involving firefights against swarms, encounters against bosses and mini-bosses, and more.
Hit that Carnifex with everything we have!
Operations mode will have a total of 6 maps at launch, and will also be playable solo for those who wish to do so. Eternal War. If PvP is what you're looking for from Space Marines 2 on the multiplayer front, the Eternal War component is where you'll be spending most of your time. The PvP component will feature a number of different modes, where players will engage in 6v6 matches. At launch, the game will feature 3 PvP modes, which brings us to our next point. Eternal War modes. Space Marine 2's 3 Eternal War modes will be plenty familiar to anyone with experience in multiplayer shooters. For starters, there's Annihilation, which is a classic team deathmatch mode, while Seize Ground will task teams with capturing and maintaining control over 3 different points scattered throughout the maps. Both modes were also featured in the original Space Marine. Finally, there's Capture and Control, which according to Saber is a new spin on the classic King of the Hill formula, with teams being tasked with fighting for control over a single zone that randomly keeps changing its location. Classes. A big part of the multiplayer experience in Space Marine 2 is going to be the classes you'll be able to play as, and this in particular is another area where the shooter is cranking things up a notch over its predecessor. With 6 playable classes, it doubles the original game's count. These 6 classes are Assault, Tactical, Heavy, Bulwark, Sniper, and Vanguard, each coming with their own unique default loadouts and special equipment. Players will, of course, be able to unlock upgrades by earning XP and leveling up through the multiplayer component's progression system. Tyrannid Swarms. The bug-like aliens known as the Tyrannids are going to be one of the primary antagonists in Space Marine 2, along with the Forces of Chaos, and Saber Interactive is leveraging its proprietary tech to bring them to life in exciting ways. Specifically, the studio is using its Swarm engine to enable players to fight against massive, overwhelming hordes of endless Tyrannids to take on in combat. Players will see huge quantities of enemies on the screen during such encounters, all being dynamically rendered in real time. Weapons. Space Marine 2 is going to live and die by the strengths of its action gameplay, so it's no surprise that the game is going all in on its selection of weapons. Many of them have already been showcased so far, from the relatively mundane like the bolt rifle and its many different variants, to melee weapons like the iconic chainsword and truly colossal warhammers, to more high-flying weaponry like the plasma incinerator. Battle Barge. The Battle Barge is going to serve as your central base of operations in Space Marine 2, not just in any one singular mode, but encompassing the entirety of the game. In the campaign, the barge is where you'll find yourself between missions, while this is also where you'll select new assignments or matches for operations and Eternal War. Customization. Customization, as you might imagine, is another area where Space Marine 2 is making some interesting promises. Cosmetic customization is, of course, something you would expect to be a heavy point of focus in a Warhammer game. And it seems Space Marine 2 is going to emulate Warhammer figure painting with its many different options. Additionally, you can expect extensive non-cosmetic options as well, with customization and upgrades available for your weapons, glasses, and more. All of this, as you may have guessed, will be done at the Battle Barge. Campaign playable offline. Given the emphasis Space Marine 2 is placing on multiplayer in general, it's fair to wonder whether the campaign is going to be playable offline for those who wish to do so. Thankfully, Saber has confirmed that this will indeed be the case, to some degree at least. If you're playing Space Marine 2's campaign solo, you will be able to do so without a persistent internet connection. You can also play operations offline, but only if you're doing so solo, and if you do, you won't have access to any progression systems. No couch co-op. With co-op being such a crucial part of Space Marine 2, can we expect it to offer local co-op as an option as well? Sadly, no. Saber has confirmed that to play Space Marine 2 co-op in operations or the campaign, you will have to link up with other players online. No microtransactions. Sadly, microtransactions and multiplayer games go hand in hand in today's day and age, but thankfully Space Marine 2 isn't following that trend. Publisher Focus Entertainment has confirmed that the game will have no microtransactions whatsoever, cosmetic or otherwise. That means everything in the game will be earnable through gameplay, and only gameplay. The publisher has also said that any and all paid DLC that's released following release will be cosmetic only. Post-launch plans. The aforementioned cosmetic DLC is only going to be a small part of Space Marine 2's post-launch plans. As per Focus Entertainment and Saber Interactive, with regular free post-launch updates, the game will add new operation missions, eternal war maps, weapons, enemies, and more. PC requirements. Space Marine 2 looks visually stunning, and its swarm tech looks equally impressive from a technical standpoint. So it's no surprise that the system requirements of its PC version are a little on the steep side, especially for the recommended settings. Regardless of what you're targeting, you're going to need an SSD and 75GB of free storage on it. For minimum settings, which will run the game at 1080p and 30fps, you'll need either an i5 8600K or a Ryzen 5 2600X, along with either a GeForce GTX 1060 or a Radeon RX 580, and 8GB of RAM. Meanwhile, for recommended settings, which will run the game at 1080p and 60fps, you'll need either an i7 12700 or a Ryzen 7 5800X, along with either a GeForce RTX 3070 or a Radeon RX 6800 XT, and 16GB of RAM. Hey, did you know that we at Gaming Bolt upload new videos every day? Stick around, drop a like, subscribe, and hit that bell, and let us know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future with a comment below.